The sound of fabric tearing was louder than any violin. Every head in the chandelier-lit hall turned as Trent Harrow's tattooed hand yanked at the maid's uniform. The sharp rip of stitches echoed off the gilded walls, silencing the orchestra mid-note and freezing champagne glasses halfway to lips. Nia Lawson stood in the center of the Billionaire's grand salon, navy dress torn open at the collar, her dark skin and the edge of black ink suddenly exposed to the entire room. Gasps rippled through the crowd of dignitaries, investors, and family members. Women covered their mouths. Men muttered under their breath. The butler's face drained of color. Gideon Vale, the billionaire host, took an involuntary step forward, shock, rage, and disbelief warring in his expression. But Trent grinned, drunk on arrogance and attention. "See," he sneered, holding the ruined fabric between his fingers as if he'd just revealed a joke. The quiet maid's got secrets. What he hadn't expected was the secret itself. Because beneath the torn fabric, stamped across Nia's chest, wasn't lace or jewelry or anything he could twist into humiliation. It was a tattoo, hard lines, precise geometry, an emblem that spoke of a past no one in this glittering mansion had imagined. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. The chandeliers seemed to flicker lower. Portraits of ancestors watched from the walls as if history itself were bearing witness. Trent's grin faltered. Gideon's fists clenched at his sides. And Nia, calm, still, unbroken, lifted her eyes and spoke in a voice so steady it cut through the silence like steel. "Your hand," she said, "off my uniform." Trent blinked, the grin freezing and then curdling. He let go as if he'd been burned. 2 buttons clattered in a small circle at their feet. The quartet's bows hovered above strings. Waiters stood stranded mid-aisle with silver trays like polished shields. Gideon Vale took 1 step forward. "Trent." "It was a joke," Trent said, but the room wasn't buying it. 50 pairs of eyes pinned him in place. Mr. Avery, the butler, arrived with a folded napkin and a needle kit he kept for emergencies. He didn't try to cover Nia. He didn't dare touch her without permission. "Miss Lawson," he said quietly, "are you injured?" "I'm fine," Nia answered. Her voice stayed level, the kind of level that made people listen. She pinched the torn V together with a steady hand. The other hand put the silver crumb pan on a side table with clinical care, as if resetting the scene back to order by force of will alone. A woman near the fireplace whispered, "Did you see?" "Don't," her husband hissed, and the whisper cut off like a string. Trent tried to laugh again and failed. "Come on. What's the big?" "The big thing," Gideon said, "is that you just assaulted a member of my staff." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The money in the room leaned toward him the way trees lean toward sun. "I barely touched her." "You ripped her clothing," Mr. Avery said. "In front of donors." A tuxedoed security man, Roland, floated into Trent's blind spot. Another positioned himself 3 paces behind Gideon's right shoulder. They didn't touch anyone. They didn't have to. Nia looked at the nearest mirror. The tear wasn't catastrophic, but it was intentional. She adjusted the fabric, then reached for the napkin Mr. Avery offered. Instead of hiding, she folded it and placed it on the side table, a clear choice everyone noticed. "Ms. Lawson," Gideon said, "do you want us to clear the room?" "No, sir," Nia said. "Your guests came to dine." She turned to the donors. "Ladies and gentlemen, dinner will be served in the East Gallery in 5 minutes. Please proceed through the archway. Watch your step." It sounded like an order and a courtesy in one breath. People moved without deciding to. Chairs scraped. Murmurs blended into motion. A hum returned to the chandeliered air, but thinner now, stretched over shock. Trent didn't move. "I said it was a joke." Roland's eyes didn't leave Trent's hands. "Sir, I'll ask you to step aside." Gideon held up a palm. "Not yet." Nia met Gideon's gaze for the first time. Most staff avoided eye contact with the owner while he was hosting. Nia did not. His eyes were colder than his reputation suggested. "Mr. Vale," she said, "your foundation needs a clean program tonight. Let's not turn your gala into a scene." "It already is a scene," Trent muttered. Gideon didn't look at him. "Ms. Lawson, I want you to get a fresh uniform and take 15 minutes. Avery, escort her. With respect, Nia said, I'll change after the guests are seated. Staff is short on the East Wing, and we have 2 vegetarians who were added last minute. If we don't reroute plates now, the kitchen will cascade. Avery glanced at her, caught between protocol and the rare staff member who saw the floor plan like a general sees a map. She's right, sir. The stagger will collapse. Gideon hesitated, then nodded once. Roland, stay with them. Nia stepped past Trent, careful and calm. He shifted to block her again. Roland's hand rose, open, not touching. Sir. Trent's jaw worked. He didn't like being the only person in a room not being obeyed. You people are out of line. We are staff, not people? Nia said, stopping with the precision of a measured centimeter. Or am I the only one you mean? Some donors paused at the archway. They were pretending not to look while completely looking. A woman with lacquered hair and a judgmental diamond drew in a soft breath. This is appalling. Yes, it is, Gideon said without turning. Gid, Trent said, trying for familiar. Don't hang me out to dry. You did that yourself. Gideon finally faced him. Apologize to Ms. Lawson. Then leave. We'll talk tomorrow. Trent stared as if translating another language. I'm not apologizing to a maid. Silence fell again, not shock this time, but the heavy kind that takes a shape. Roland stepped closer. Sir. Trent's shoulders bunched. If anyone should apologize. Nia moved. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't violent. Her left hand closed around Trent's wrist for half a second. Not a squeeze, not a wrench, just a precise angle and pressure that turned his balance into confusion. His foot tapped backward to keep from falling, a small, stupid stumble that stole the rest of his sentence and most of his pride. She released him before the room could process the motion. Don't touch me again, Nia said. The tone wasn't loud. It was final. The donors who'd pretended to move on pretended harder. Several phones dipped. One older man, white hair at parade rest, watched Nia with a frown that looked like memory trying to wake. Apologize, Gideon repeated. Trent swallowed. He looked at Gideon, then at the room, then at Nia. He saw no exit that let him keep his face. Fine. Don't, Nia said, and it shocked him so much he stopped. Don't apologize to get out of trouble. Apologize because you know what you did. Trent's face modeled. For a heartbeat, he looked like he might double down, make it worse. Then something in Gideon's stare changed his math. I'm sorry, Trent forced out. For ripping my uniform in front of your host's guests, Nia said, unblinking. For putting your hands on me without consent. The room held still for the second sentence. Trent managed a shallow nod. That. Mr. Avery, Nia said, please note the incident in the log. Yes, Ms. Lawson. Gideon exhaled, a thread of air through clenched teeth. Roland, see Mr. Harrow to the library. I don't need to go to the library, Trent said. I need a drink. You'll have water, Gideon said. And a car. Trent's jaw jumped. He went because Roland was already standing where he wanted to stand. When they were gone, the room exhaled as if a pressure door had opened. The quartet picked up a safe waltz. Staff flowed in practiced patterns. Nia turned and began directing traffic with 2 fingers and a nod, shifting the line of guests toward the East Gallery, breaking logjams before they formed, taking a tray from a junior footman who looked ready to faint. Thank you, the boy whispered. Shoulders down, Nia murmured. Short steps. Look where you're going, not where you're afraid. He straightened and made it through the doorway like he'd trained for it. Avery leaned in. Housekeeping has a spare dress pressed in your size. I'll change in 3 minutes, Nia said. After we fix the vegetarians and swap the 12 top to 2 6s so the ambassador can see the stage. Avery blinked. How did you? His security hates his back to a door, she said. They've been angling for that corner since cocktails. Give it to them and you'll stop the pacing. He didn't ask how she noticed. He just moved. Gideon stood alone for a rare second. Donors kept a respectful distance, unsure where the edge now lived. He watched Nia recalibrate the room as if she'd planned the interruption. Not a tremor in her hands. No shiver of embarrassment. Not even speed. Efficiency. Command, disguised as service. "Ms. Lawson," he said when she stepped close enough. "Sir. You all right?" "I'm working," she said. "That's not what I asked." "I'm all right," she said. Her eyes flicked past his shoulder, counting bodies, gauging pace, feeling the temperature of the crowd like a palm to a door. "The program will hold." He hesitated. "I'm sorry this happened in my house." "It happened to me," Nia said. "In your house." He nodded once. "We're not done with it." "I know." For a moment, neither of them looked away. It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't warmth. It was recognition that something had shifted and would not shift back. "Go change," Gideon said. "Take the time." "In 2 minutes." She angled toward the kitchen pass. "We're short hands." Gideon watched her go, the torn line of navy still visible at the collar. He had the sudden, irrational sense that he'd seen a gun peek from a holster where he'd expected a handkerchief. Not a weapon. A history. It irritated him that he didn't know what it was. At the archway, the white-haired man with the military posture had not moved on. He stared at the exact place where the fabric had torn, as if replaying a freeze frame. He didn't speak to anyone. He didn't take out his phone. He just looked, and then his mouth formed 2 words Gideon couldn't hear. In the service corridor, Nia cut through the controlled chaos of silver and steam. The kitchen breathed heat and discipline. She swapped the ambassador's seating cards herself, slid 2 vegetarian plates to Station 3, and checked the saucing at pass. She touched nothing she didn't have to, but everything changed around the places she stood, steadier after she left. "Uniform," Avery reminded gently. "Now," Nia said. 30 seconds. She stepped into the staff room and closed the door. The noise outside dropped to a murmur. She took a breath, removed the torn dress with practiced motions, hung it on a hook, and reached for the spare. In the mirror, the edge of black ink along her chest looked back. A geometry of lines. Not pretty. Not soft. Accurate. Her fingers paused on the first button for half a beat. No longer. She buttoned the dress, smoothed the seams, and pinned the collar. When she opened the door, Avery was waiting with a small, respectful distance. "Thank you," she said. "May I ask what it is?" he asked, eyes averted. "No," she said. There was no malice in it. He nodded. "The East Gallery is seating." "Good." She started back toward the noise, her stride the same as it had been before a man tried to strip her in public. In the salon, the last of the donors flowed toward dinner. Gideon stood at the threshold, hand on the archway, as if holding the house upright by touch. Trent's laughter had been replaced by the careful politeness of guests who weren't sure what story they'd witnessed and were already deciding which version would be safest to tell. Nia passed him without a hitch. He spoke without meaning to. "Ms. Lawson." She stopped. "We'll speak after the program," he said. "Privately." "Yes, sir." "And Ms. Lawson," he searched for words that weren't legal, weren't PR, weren't money. He settled for the only ones that fit. "No one lays a hand on my staff again." "See that they don't," she said. She turned and stepped into the East Gallery, where the murmurs of wealth were about to resume their usual music. Behind her, the Grand Salon kept a secret it had not kept well enough. Not lace. Not jewelry. An emblem in black lines, half seen, impossible to forget, hung over the house like a question. And across the room, the white-haired man finally whispered the words he'd been hunting. That wasn't decoration. He didn't say what he thought it was. Not yet. But half the room felt the chill anyway. The East Gallery glowed with candlelight and polished silver, but nobody tasted the food. Forks moved, glasses clinked, words were exchanged, yet every conversation bent back toward the same image, the ripped uniform, the glimpse of black ink carved into Nia Lawson's skin. At the head of the long mahogany table, Gideon Vale raised a glass, his smile ironed flat for the sake of donors and cameras. "To those who give back," he said, voice steady, almost too steady. "And to the men and women who sacrificed before us." The trustees applauded. Champagne flutes tapped. The photographer snapped discreet frames. But when Gideon lowered his glass, he saw what everyone else saw, eyes that didn't look at him, but at her. Nia was posted at the far side of the room, replenishing wine with the same calm precision as before. The new uniform fit perfectly, collar sharp, seams neat. Yet guests still leaned in to whisper, heads tilting toward her like moths to a flame they couldn't name. "Did you see it clearly?" one woman murmured behind a fan. "Not the whole thing." "Enough. It looked military. Some kind of special unit." "No maid wears a mark like that." The speculation spread faster than the dessert carts. At the corner table, an older gentleman with a hard spine and close-cropped white hair put down his fork with deliberate care. He had said almost nothing since the incident, only watching. When the light shifted and the collar of Nia's new dress slid a fraction, revealing the faint edge of the tattoo again, his jaw clenched. "Impossible," he whispered to himself. Across the table, a trustee caught the word. "What's impossible, Colonel?" The man didn't answer. Trent Harrow was nowhere to be seen. Rumor said security had walked him to the library and locked the bar. But his absence was just as loud as his presence had been, and the donors felt it. A man with too much to drink had tried to humiliate a servant. Instead, he'd exposed something that unsettled everyone. Because humiliation was easy to laugh off. Power was not. Halfway through the first course, Mrs. Vale's sister leaned toward Gideon. "You need to explain what happened," she said in a low hiss. "People are saying the maid has combat ink." Gideon didn't look at her. He was watching Nia carry a tray of stemware through a maze of chairs without spilling a drop. Her face was unreadable, her movements efficient, but the room bent around her as though she were the one hosting. "She's staff," Gideon said simply. "Staff doesn't wear marks like that." "She does," Gideon said, his voice colder than the wine. The butler Avery glided to Nia's side, murmured something, and handed her a folded linen to replace the napkin she'd set aside. She nodded, tucked it into place, and kept working. But whispers wouldn't die. That was Force Recon Inc. No seals. Couldn't be. Why would she be here? You saw the scars. That's combat, not art. A man in uniform at the far end, one of the donors from the base, set down his knife. His hand trembled once before he clasped it still. His eyes followed Nia like he knew something the others didn't. Then, as dessert plates were cleared, the silence fractured. "Miss Lawson," a voice called from the table. Too loud. Too deliberate. Every head turned. A woman in diamonds, the kind who lived off proximity to money, raised her chin. "Tell us, where did you serve?" The gallery froze. Nia paused mid-step with a tray in hand. Her eyes swept the table once, reading posture, tone, threat. Then she set the tray down with perfect care, folded her hands, and inclined her head politely. "I serve here," she said. It was the only answer. It was not enough. The woman leaned forward. "That mark on your chest isn't from here." "Mrs. King," Gideon cut in sharply. "Enough." But the room had already tasted blood. Whispers rose again, sharper, hungrier. "She's hiding something. Why hasn't she denied it? What is she really doing here?" Nia collected the tray and walked from table to table, refilling water glasses as if the interrogation hadn't happened. But inside she felt the shift. The damage was done. The tattoo wasn't just a mistake of cloth. It was a story clawing its way into the open. And stories, once seen, never go back to silence. At the doorway, Colonel Hayes, the white-haired man, rose slowly, his napkin falling onto the polished floor. His voice carried low, but every soldier in the room heard the cadence. "That wasn't decoration," he said. "That was First Force Recon." The gallery gasped as one. Nia's hands stilled on the crystal pitcher. For the first time all night, her eyes closed. Just for a second. Then she opened them again, spine straight, jaw firm. The secret was out. And nothing in Gideon Vale's mansion would ever be the same again. The gallery broke apart like glass under pressure. Forks clattered against porcelain, chairs scraped marble. Some guests leaned forward, hungry for scandal. Others leaned back, uneasy, as though the tattoo itself carried weight that could topple fortunes. Gideon Vale did not move. He sat at the head of the table, fingers laced, eyes fixed on the black maid standing 20 feet away with a pitcher in her hand and silence in her posture. His silence was heavier than the whispers, heavier than the chandeliers that trembled above the gallery. Nia Lawson placed the pitcher down gently, her gaze fixed on the linen tablecloth instead of the stairs. She adjusted the collar of her new uniform, though everyone had already seen what lay beneath. "First Force Recon," Colonel Hayes repeated, his gravel voice cutting the gallery's air in half. He hadn't sat down. He didn't blink. "Am I wrong, Miss Lawson?" The room leaned in. Nia's eyes lifted once, to him, to Gideon, to the crowd, and then lowered again. "Dinner service is concluded," she said softly. "Coffee and digestives will be offered in the West Lounge." She turned to leave. "Answer the question," a donor barked, his face flushed with wine and self-importance. "Are you military? Is that what you're hiding?" "Enough," Gideon said. The single word carried authority, and the room froze. He rose from his chair with deliberate calm. "This is not an inquisition. Miss Lawson is staff. She is not here to entertain speculation. You will respect her or you will leave." His tone wasn't loud, but the kind of quiet that made even the most arrogant hedge fund manager fall still. But silence didn't mean control. It meant tension pulled so tight it could snap with a breath. Mrs. King's diamond necklace glinted as she leaned forward. "Gideon, you can't pretend we didn't see what we saw. That was no ordinary marking. You owe your guests an explanation." "I owe you dinner," Gideon replied flatly. "And you've had it." The butler Avery cleared his throat. "Shall we adjourn to the lounge, sir?" "Yes," Gideon said. His jaw worked once, a muscle twitching near his temple. "Now." Chairs slid back, conversations sparked low and urgent. The guests rose, their designer shoes whispering across marble. The gallery emptied in currents of perfume, silk, and money. Every current bent around one still figure, Nia, standing by the service cart, spine unbroken, eyes unreadable. When the last guest vanished through the archway, Gideon remained. He hadn't moved from the head of the table. His hand rested against the mahogany like it anchored him. Avery lingered near the doorway. "Sir?" "Leave us," Gideon said. The butler hesitated, then inclined his head and slipped out, closing the doors behind him with a hush that left only two people in the cavernous gallery. Nia turned at last. Her face was calm, but her shoulders squared as though she expected an attack. "Miss Lawson," Gideon said. His voice was measured, but colder than before. "What the hell just happened in my house?" She didn't answer immediately. She moved instead, collecting abandoned glasses, stacking plates, aligning silverware as if the world hadn't shifted. The ritual steadied her, and she let the silence stretch until it pressed against him like a test. "Nia," he snapped. Her eyes lifted. Steady. Controlled. It was a tattoo. "Don't insult me," he said, stepping closer. "Half this county just watched my oldest friend rip your uniform and expose something that has veterans whispering. Recon. Special Forces. That's not a decoration you buy on the street." "Mr. Vale," she said quietly, "I serve in your house. I clean your floors. I set your tables. That's all your guests need to know." "That's not all I need to know." His voice sharpened. "Who are you really?" She studied him for a moment, then turned back to the plates. "Someone who works for you. Nothing more." "You expect me to believe that?" Gideon's tone darkened. "I built this empire by knowing exactly who stood in my house. No secrets. No surprises. And now a maid with scars and ink out of a war zone is standing in front of me, telling me she's no one." Her hand paused on a silver fork. She set it down with care. "Sometimes no one is the safest thing to be." The words landed heavier than she intended. Gideon's eyes narrowed. "So it's true." Nia's silence was its own answer. For the first time all evening, Gideon looked unsettled. He'd seen boardroom wars, hostile takeovers, and political scandals, but this was different. This was personal. In his home, in front of his name, a secret had slipped into the open, and he wasn't the one controlling it. "Tomorrow," he said finally, voice clipped, "you and I are going to have a conversation. No deflections. No evasions. I want the truth. Nia gathered the last plate and stacked it neatly on the cart. She pushed it toward the service doors, her eyes not leaving his. Then tomorrow, she said, you'll have to decide whether you want the truth or your peace. She disappeared into the kitchen corridor, the echo of her footsteps swallowed by the silence she left behind. Gideon Vale remained alone in the gallery, staring at the empty chair she had occupied moments earlier. For the first time in years, the billionaire felt something he couldn't quite name. It wasn't anger. It wasn't power. It was unease. And Gideon Vale hated unease more than anything in the world. The gala ended early. Gideon Vale never announced it, but the message passed from glance to glance, whispered by the butler to the band, by trustees to their chauffeurs, until the music faded and the valet lines snaked out into the night. By midnight, the mansion's chandeliers were dimmed, the echo of laughter replaced by silence. But outside, in the city's most expensive penthouses and hotel suites, the gala had only just begun. Because nobody was talking about the charity. Nobody was talking about Gideon's speech. Everyone was talking about the Maid. At the Hilton bar downtown, two CEOs leaned across their tumblers. You saw it, right? I saw enough. Recon Inc. Special Forces. That's not a maid. Then what the hell is she doing in Vale's house? At a private club off Fifth, a hedge fund manager whispered to his wife. Maybe it's a cover. Maybe Vale's hiding something. Who hires someone like that unless she's protecting him? By dawn, hashtags were circulating in the closed channels of the wealthy and powerful. Hashtag the Maid at Vale Mansion. Some said she was a bodyguard planted under disguise. Some said she was ex-Black Ops. Others whispered darker things, that Gideon Vale was keeping a secret weapon in plain sight. Inside the mansion, Nia Lawson moved through the kitchen like she had every other morning, washing silver, counting linens, correcting schedules. But even among staff, the air had changed. The junior footman avoided her eyes. The housekeeper spoke softer around her. Even Avery, the unshakable butler, lingered an extra second before handing her the day's assignments. People are talking, he said carefully. People always talk, Nia replied, tying her apron with military precision. Not like this. Words spread faster than fire. She said nothing. In his study upstairs, Gideon Vale stared at 3 missed calls from the board and 2 from his PR director. He hadn't answered any of them. The Vale empire thrived on control. Control of markets, of stories, of perception. And now, for the first time, a story was slipping from his grip. He closed the phone and looked out over the gardens where staff were setting up breakfast service. His gaze found her immediately, Nia Lawson, hair pulled back, carrying trays as if last night hadn't happened. But it had. And the world wasn't going to let it go. At noon, Gideon's oldest rival, Leonard Cross, called a press conference. Cameras flashed as Cross smiled thinly. Charity begins at home, he said to laughter. But at Vale Mansion, apparently so does covert warfare. If rumors are true, Gideon Vale employs a former soldier as a maid. One wonders, what else is he hiding? The soundbite looped on every financial channel before dinner. Back at the mansion, Trent Harrow was gone, banished quietly with a car and a warning. But his damage remained. In the staff corridor, the junior footman finally asked the question out loud. Miss Lawson, what was that tattoo? Nia set down the tray she was polishing. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said evenly, something I didn't want any of you to see. She left him with that and walked away, her footsteps precise, steady, unstoppable. By nightfall, the Vale Mansion wasn't just a mansion anymore. It was a rumor mill, a legend, a storm center. And Nia Lawson, the woman who wanted nothing more than to remain invisible, had become the most visible person in Gideon Vale's empire. The morning after the gala, the mansion was quieter than usual. Even the staff whispered less, moving in careful rhythms as if afraid to disturb the air. But for Nia Lawson, silence had always been the safest companion. She polished the silver tray in small, precise circles. Left hand steady, right hand exact. Every motion was discipline, habit, the kind of habit you never really lose, no matter how many uniforms you change. Avery entered the service room, closing the door behind him. "Mr. Vale wants to see you," he said. His tone was neutral, but his eyes betrayed unease. Nia kept polishing. "When?" "In the study." She set the tray down, wiped her hands on the linen, and followed him without a word. Gideon Vale's study smelled of leather, smoke, and power. Books lined the walls, but the desk was empty except for a crystal decanter and 2 glasses. Gideon stood behind it, jacket off, tie loosened, his gaze sharp as glass. "Sit," he said. Nia remained standing. He studied her for a long moment. "Do you know how many calls I've had since last night? Senators, CEOs, journalists. They all want to know about the maid in my house with a special forces tattoo." She didn't respond. He leaned forward. "You're going to tell me who you are, Nia? No more evasions." Her jaw tightened. Memories pressed in. The heat, the sand, the smell of burning metal. She tried to shove them back, but Gideon's stare didn't allow it. Finally, she spoke. "You really want to know?" "Yes." Her eyes fixed on the decanter between them, but her voice carried her far away. It was 2014. Afghanistan. The world had been dust and gunfire. The sound of rotors above, the taste of blood and iron in her mouth. She had been Sergeant Nia Lawson then, Force Recon Marine. First into the building, last out. Her squad had been pinned down in a schoolhouse outside Helmand Province, surrounded on 3 sides. The air reeked of cordite and fear. She remembered Corporal Jenkins screaming for a medic. She remembered dragging him across broken concrete, bullets stitching the wall inches from her head. She remembered pressing her hands against a wound she couldn't close and whispering, "Stay with me," even as she knew he wouldn't. 3 bronze stars. 1 purple heart. 14 scars she carried under her uniform and 1 tattoo she never wanted anyone to see again. They had told her she was a hero. She had buried friends with that word carved on their stones. When she came home, hero felt like an insult. Her eyes refocused on Gideon. He hadn't moved. His jaw was tight, his eyes unreadable. "So yes," Nia said quietly, "what your guest saw was Force Recon Inc. My unit. My life before this." "Why here?" Gideon demanded. "Why hide in my house as a maid?" "Because I wanted to disappear." Her voice was steady, but the words cut. "Because I got tired of being thanked by people who didn't understand what we lost. Because wiping down marble and serving wine doesn't come with blood on my hands." She straightened. "That's the only explanation you need." Gideon studied her, but for once, he didn't have a reply. The billionaire who always had an answer was silent. Outside the study, Avery waited at the door. He'd heard none of it, but when Nia stepped out, he caught the look in her eyes, a look of someone who had just opened a door she'd sworn would stay closed. Behind her, Gideon Vale poured himself a drink with a hand that trembled once before it steadied. The maid wasn't just a maid anymore. And the billionaire knew it. Trent Harrow had not left the mansion quietly. He had stormed into the library the night before, demanding whiskey, demanding respect, demanding that Gideon explain why a maid had been allowed to humiliate him in front of half the city's power brokers. This morning, he was still there, slumped in a leather chair, shirt unbuttoned, tie hanging loose, a tumbler half empty in his hand. The curtains were drawn, but sunlight cut through anyway, stabbing his eyes. The door opened without knocking. Gideon Vale stepped in. His jacket was sharp, his movements sharper. "Get up," Gideon said. Trent squinted. "Morning to you too." "Morning." Gideon's voice was ice. "Do you know what I've dealt with since last night? The board calling. Reporters circling. Cross running his mouth on television. All because you couldn't control yourself." Trent barked a bitter laugh. "Control myself? She's a maid, Gideon. She's staff. I was having a little fun. Since when does a servant take priority over your closest friend?" "You ripped her uniform in front of 50 witnesses," Gideon snapped. "That wasn't fun. That was assault." Trent pushed himself to his feet, swaying slightly. "Don't lecture me. You think you're untouchable, but you're not. People saw her. That tattoo, whatever the hell it was. She's dangerous, Gideon. You don't know who you've got living under your roof." "I know enough," Gideon said. Do you? Trent jabbed a finger at him. Because your reputation is hanging by a thread. Everyone's asking the same question. Why is a billionaire hiding a soldier in a maid's uniform? And guess what? They don't believe it's a coincidence. Gideon stepped closer, his height and authority pressing Trent back into the chair. You humiliated yourself, Trent. Not me. Not her. And from now on, you're finished in my house. Trent's face flushed red. You're choosing her over me? I'm choosing decency over arrogance, Gideon said coldly. And if you had any sense left, you'd apologize publicly before this ruins you entirely. Trent sneered. Apologize to a maid? You've lost your mind. No, Gideon said, his voice dropping to a lethal quiet. I've lost my patience. Get out. Roland, the head of security, appeared in the doorway at that exact moment, arms folded, eyes unblinking. Trent glanced between them, rage and humiliation boiling in his veins. This isn't over, he spat. You'll regret making me the enemy. Better enemy than friend, Gideon replied. Roland stepped forward. Trent shoved past him, muttering curses under his breath as he staggered into the hall. By the time he reached the front door, staff had stopped pretending not to look. The mighty Trent Harrow, Gideon Vale's oldest ally, was leaving like a disgraced intruder. For the first time in his gilded life, Trent felt the sting of irrelevance. The staff didn't bow their heads. They didn't look away. They looked through him, past him, as if he had already ceased to matter. He slammed the door behind him, but the sound rang hollow. Back inside, Gideon stood in the library, staring at the half-empty glass Trent had left on the table. His hand clenched until his knuckles whitened. For years, Trent had been loud, reckless, but useful. A drinking partner, a distraction, a man who could be wild when Gideon needed to remain polished. Now he was a liability. Worse than that, he was a threat. And thanks to him, the secret Gideon hadn't even known existed had been dragged into the light. In the service wing, Nia polished glasses as though nothing had changed. But she heard the door slam, felt the ripple of tension fade through the mansion, and knew exactly what it meant. Trent Harrow had been cast out. Humiliated. Broken. But men like Trent didn't stay broken for long. And Nia Lawson knew dangerous men always came back. The library door had barely stopped trembling from Trent's exit when Gideon Vale turned to Roland. Make sure he doesn't come back, Gideon ordered. Yes, sir, Roland replied. Do you want a shadow on him? Gideon thought for a beat, then shook his head. Not yet. Let him stew. He'll make his next move soon enough. Roland gave a curt nod and left, the door closing softly behind him. Now the mansion was quiet again. Too quiet. Gideon poured himself a glass of water from the decanter Trent had left behind, then set it down untouched. His jaw worked as he glanced at the clock. 11:30. The board would be waiting for answers. The press would be circling. But one problem mattered more than all of them. The maid. He pressed the intercom. Avery. Bring Miss Lawson to the study. Alone. Minutes later, the door opened. Nia Lawson stepped in, uniform crisp, hands steady, eyes calm. She closed the door herself and faced him without a word. Sit, Gideon said. She remained standing. His lips thinned. You have a problem with chairs, Miss Lawson? I prefer to stand when I'm being interrogated, she said evenly. The reply caught him off guard. For a second, silence stretched between them. Then Gideon leaned forward across the desk. Who are you really? I told you, Nia replied. Your maid. Don't, Gideon snapped. His voice cracked the air like a whip. Don't play the same game you played last night. Everyone saw the ink. Everyone's whispering my house is hiding a soldier in a uniform. You think I can afford that kind of scandal? Nia's expression didn't shift. What you can afford and what you can't isn't my concern. His eyes narrowed. It damn well is when it happens under my roof. She tilted her head slightly. Then maybe you should choose your friends more carefully. The jab landed. Gideon's jaw tightened. He hated being reminded of Trent's humiliation, and more than that, he hated being reminded he hadn't been able to control it. You think you're clever, he said. But clever doesn't answer the question. That tattoo, Force Recon, isn't it? Why does a Marine end up polishing silver in my mansion? Nia's eyes flicked to the window, sunlight cutting across the shelves of leather-bound volumes, before she looked back at him. Because it's quieter here than in Helmand Province. Because serving wine doesn't involve watching friends bleed out on concrete. Because sometimes disappearing is the only way to keep breathing. Her voice hadn't risen, but the truth in it made Gideon feel like the room had shrunk. You could have gone private security. Government contracts. Anything. Why this? Because this, Nia said simply, doesn't require me to carry a gun. The silence that followed was heavier than his marble desk. Finally, Gideon spoke, slower this time. If that's true, then why didn't you cover it up better? Why let it be seen? I didn't let it, she replied. It was torn open. His eyes flickered. For a brief second, he saw her not as a maid or a soldier, but as a woman standing in his house, uniform ripped, dignity stripped, and still refusing to bend. He exhaled once, then straightened. From now on, no more secrets. You work in my house, I need to know what's walking my halls. Understand? Nia held his gaze, unblinking. You don't need to know everything. I do, Gideon pressed. No, she said softly, with a weight that carried more authority than volume. You need to know I'll protect this house as long as I'm in it. That's all. The words unsettled him more than a confession would have. Protect. Not serve. Not obey. Protect. He wanted to push harder, but he found himself nodding instead. Very well. But if trouble follows you here, I won't have my name dragged through it. Are we clear? Nia's voice was calm, steady as always. Crystal, sir. She turned and left the study, her steps measured, unhurried. Gideon watched her go, a gnawing unease clawing at his chest. He was used to reading people, bending them, owning them. But with Nia Lawson he wasn't sure if he'd just won ground or surrendered it. The first whispers didn't come from inside the mansion. They came from the outside. Two men sat in a black sedan across the street, their windows cracked just enough for cigarette smoke to curl into the night. The mansion's gates stood tall and gleaming, a fortress of iron and stone. But both men weren't looking at the architecture. They were watching the staff entrance. You sure it's her? The driver muttered. The passenger tapped ash into an empty coffee cup. Tattoo doesn't lie. Recon. Lawson. I thought she was buried in Afghanistan. She's not, the driver said, starting the engine. And now the billionaire's got her. Which means we've got a problem. Inside, the Vale mansion tried to resume its routine. Staff bustled through the halls, cleaning up the remnants of the gala. But a current of unease ran beneath every step. Nia Lawson worked in the service corridor, folding linens with mechanical precision. She didn't look up when Avery appeared at her side, holding a thin envelope. This arrived for you. Her hand stilled. For me. Avery nodded. No return address. Slipped under the staff gate. Nia wiped her palms on the apron before taking the envelope. She didn't open it immediately. Instead, she scanned it, front, back, edges, like she'd done with explosives in another life. The paper smelled faintly of smoke. She slid a finger under the flap. One piece of paper. A single line written in block letters. You can't hide forever. Nia folded it once and tucked it into her apron pocket. Her face didn't change, but her pulse quickened. She looked up at Avery. Who saw this? Just me. Keep it that way. Avery hesitated, then gave a small nod. As you wish. Meanwhile, Gideon Vale sat in his office with Roland standing by the window. Cross is circling like a shark, Roland said. He's using the gala incident to stir investors. Suggesting you're hiding mercenaries in your house. Gideon leaned back, his fingers drumming against the desk. Cross has always wanted to paint me paranoid. Now he has a weapon. And the maid? Roland asked carefully. What's your plan with her? Gideon's jaw tightened. I don't like having mysteries under my roof. But I like losing control even less. Keep an eye on her. Quietly. Roland nodded once. Already done. That evening, as staff served dinner in the West Lounge, Gideon noticed something he couldn't ignore. Nia wasn't just serving. She was scanning. Her eyes flicked to corners, to exits, to unfamiliar faces. When one of the security men leaned against the doorframe, she corrected his stance with a quiet word. "Shift left, you're blocking the sight line." He obeyed without question. The billionaire frowned. Guests might not notice. But he did. That wasn't how a maid moved. That was how a soldier moved. Alert, calculating, always preparing for the next blow. When the lounge cleared, he intercepted her near the hallway. "What was that?" he asked. "What was what?" "You gave orders to my guard." "I gave advice," she corrected, her voice calm. He listened. Gideon stepped closer. "Who sent that note?" Her eyes flickered for the briefest second. Then her mask slipped back into place. "What note?" "Don't lie to me," he said, his voice low. "I built empires on spotting lies. Something's coming, isn't it?" Nia's lips pressed into a thin line. "It doesn't concern you." "Doesn't concern me?" Gideon snapped. "It's in my house. Everything in this house concerns me." She met his stare without flinching. "Then be ready. Because danger doesn't knock. It walks through the front door." Later that night, while the mansion slept, Nia stood alone in the servants' courtyard. The air was cool, the stars sharp against the velvet sky. She pulled the letter from her apron and unfolded it again. The words glared at her in the moonlight. "You can't hide forever." Her thumb brushed the scar near her collarbone, hidden beneath fabric. Old wounds, old ghosts. She had buried them once. Now they were clawing their way back. She heard a shuffle behind her. Roland stepped out of the shadows. "Why are you awake?" she asked without turning. "I could ask you the same." "Old habits." Roland studied her in silence, then said, "You're not what you pretend to be." "No," she admitted quietly. "I'm not." He nodded as if he'd already known. "If trouble comes, you won't face it alone." She glanced at him then, measuring the man, the steadiness in his eyes. "Trouble's already here," she said. At the same hour, across town, Trent Harrow nursed a drink in a smoky bar. His pride burned hotter than the liquor. The humiliation of being cast out, of being replaced by a maid, gnawed at him like acid. A stranger slid into the booth across from him. Dark coat, eyes that didn't blink enough. "You're Trent Harrow," the man said. Trent scowled. "Who's asking?" "Someone who doesn't like Nia Lawson any more than you do." The stranger slid a photograph across the table. A grainy image of Nia in uniform, rifle slung across her back, eyes hard as steel. Trent stared. His humiliation twisted into something darker. "What do you want?" "Information," the man said. "And a way into the Vale mansion." Trent's lips curled into a bitter smile. "Maybe we can help each other." Back at the mansion, Nia slipped the note into a metal box under her bed and locked it tight. Then she sat on the edge of the mattress, back straight, hands resting on her knees. For a long time, she didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't breathe deeper than a whisper. Because she knew what whispers meant. Whispers were the first sound before the storm. And this storm was coming straight for her. The attack didn't come at dawn. It came in the soft velvet hours before midnight, when the mansion was at its quietest. A camera in the east wing flickered once, then went dark. Roland saw the feed drop from the control room and was halfway to the hallway when the second camera blinked out. "Power surge," one of the younger guards asked. Roland shook his head. "Too clean." He reached for his radio. "Check perimeter." But he didn't get the words out. The crack of glass echoed down the hall. Nia Lawson was in the nursery, of all places, checking the windows. She had gotten used to pacing the halls at night, a habit no maid should have, but one she couldn't kill. The sound of shattering glass stopped her cold. She didn't hesitate. She moved. Her shoes whispered against the carpet as she cut through the hallways, eyes scanning, ears tuned to every shift in the air. By the time she reached the library, she saw the outline of 3 men in dark clothes slipping through the broken French doors. Intruders. Professional. Her chest tightened, but not from fear. It was the familiar burn of adrenaline, the muscle memory of combat roaring back to life. She didn't reach for a weapon. She didn't need one. In his study upstairs, Gideon heard the alarm bell echo faintly through the halls. He slammed the ledger shut and stormed into the corridor. Roland! Roland was already there, weapon drawn, voice taut. We've got movement on the lower level. 3, maybe 4 inside. Gideon froze. Inside? How? We'll figure it out later. Stay here. Oh. No, Gideon's jaw hardened. This is my house. He started down the stairs. Roland cursed under his breath but followed. The intruders spread through the library, flashlights darting across shelves and velvet curtains. One muttered into a radio. Target should be upstairs. Move fast. They weren't here to steal silver. They were here for someone. Nia stepped from the shadows before they could finish sweeping the room. Her posture was calm, precise. You're trespassing, she said quietly. The nearest man spun, pistol raised. Who the hell? She moved first. Her hand snapped the barrel aside, twisting his wrist until the gun clattered to the floor. A kick to the knee dropped him. Before the others could react, she was already shifting, striking, turning, dismantling. Each motion was efficient, brutal, fast. In less than 15 seconds, 2 were down groaning, 1 unconscious, the 3rd staggering backward toward the door. That was when Gideon appeared in the doorway. He froze. The billionaire had seen bar fights, scuffles, even watched men tear each other apart in the stock market. He had never seen anything like this. Nia moved like water, like shadow, like violence and grace fused into one. Her uniform, so neat, was torn at the collar again, revealing the black ink on her chest. The tattoo wasn't just a mark, it was a declaration of war, burned into her skin. The last intruder raised a knife in panic. Don't, Gideon began. But Nia didn't wait. She sidestepped, twisted the man's arm behind his back, and slammed him into the bookshelf hard enough to shake leather-bound tomes loose. He collapsed, knife clattering harmlessly across the floor. Silence. Nia straightened, chest rising and falling, her expression unchanged. She glanced at Gideon as though he'd merely interrupted her cleaning. Roland burst in seconds later, gun raised. He stopped dead when he saw the intruders already down. What the hell? They're alive, Nia said. Tie them. Question later. Roland obeyed without hesitation. Gideon couldn't move. He couldn't speak. His mind replayed what he had just seen, frame by frame. The speed. The precision. The absolute control. That wasn't luck. That wasn't a lucky maid defending herself. That was years of training, discipline, blood. That was a soldier. When the intruders were bound and Roland had dragged them to the holding room, Gideon finally found his voice. You knew, he said, eyes locked on Nia. You knew they'd come. Nia wiped her hands on her apron, as if the fight had been nothing more than spilled wine. I knew something would. Don't play word games with me, Gideon snapped. His voice cracked with something he hadn't felt in years, fear. You moved like you've done this 100 times. I have, she said softly. The admission hit harder than any blow. Gideon stepped closer, his voice low and raw. You're not here by accident. You're not here to clean my floors. So tell me the truth, why my house? Why me? Nia held his gaze. In her eyes, he didn't see fear. He saw walls, thick and unyielding. But for the first time, he also saw something else, a flicker of reluctant honesty. Because this house was quiet, she said. Because you weren't supposed to notice me. Because I thought maybe I could finally disappear. Her voice didn't rise, but it carried the weight of every scar, every grave, every night she had stood guard while others slept. Gideon's throat tightened. He saw the maid who had poured his wine, folded his linens, blended into the background. And now he saw the warrior standing in his library, intruders at her feet, unshaken. For the first time, Gideon Vale realized the truth. She wasn't protecting herself. She was protecting his house. And she had been doing it all along. The holding room was a converted wine cellar, stone walls, steel door, cold as a crypt. The 3 intruders sat bound to chairs, wrists zip-tied, ankles chained. Roland stood watch with 2 guards, his pistol holstered but close. Gideon entered first, his presence filling the room like a storm. Nia followed quietly, her uniform still disheveled from the fight. She moved with the same economy of motion, calm where everyone else buzzed with tension. One of the intruders lifted his chin. A jagged scar cut across his cheek. He sneered. "She hasn't changed. Thought you were dead, Lawson." Gideon's head snapped toward her. "He knows you." Nia's jaw tightened. She didn't answer. The man laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "We were told you vanished. Knew new life. Hiding like a coward in a billionaire's house." Roland stepped forward and slammed a fist into the man's gut. The laughter choked off. "Talk," Roland growled. "Why are you here?" The intruder coughed blood onto the floor, then spat. "Orders." "Whose?" Gideon demanded. The man only smiled, red staining his teeth. "Not mine to say." Nia moved closer, her shadow falling across him. Her voice was low, precise, cutting. "Who sent you? Was it Cross? Or someone else from the old days?" The smile faltered. He swallowed hard. "Cross paid. But others want you too. Everyone thought you were buried with your squad. Seeing you alive? Changes things." Silence fell heavy. Gideon turned slowly to Nia. "Explain. Now." Her shoulders squared. She had run from this moment for years, but running wasn't possible anymore. "My name is Sergeant Nia Lawson," she said, her voice steady. "Force Recon Marine. Afghanistan. Helmand Province, 2014. Roland's brows rose slightly, but he didn't interrupt. Nia's eyes locked on Gideon. "My unit was tasked with securing a schoolhouse used as a weapons depot. We were ambushed. Outnumbered 10 to 1. Air support couldn't reach us. We held for 17 hours. The intruder snorted. "Held? You slaughtered everyone." Nia ignored him. Her gaze didn't waver. "My squad didn't make it out. Jenkins, Alvarez, Thompson, every one of them gone. I carried the last survivor on my back until the chopper came. He died before we hit altitude." Her hand brushed unconsciously against her side, where the scar lay hidden beneath fabric. "I walked away with burns, shrapnel, and enough ghosts to keep me awake for the rest of my life. They called me a hero. I called myself cursed." The words hung in the room. Gideon said nothing, but his throat worked once. "I came back," Nia continued, "and I didn't want medals. I didn't want contracts. I wanted to disappear. So I chose the lowest profile I could, Maid's work. Anonymous. Quiet. A uniform that no one looks at twice. Except last night when someone ripped it away." Her eyes flicked to Gideon, sharp. "And now my cover's gone. My past is in your house." The intruder smirked again. "Your past doesn't just sit in shadows. It hunts. And it's hunting you now." Roland drove a boot into his shin, silencing him. But the words lingered like poison. Gideon exhaled, slow, measured. His eyes studied Nia, searching her face as though he could peel back the years and scars. "All this time," he said quietly, "you've been hiding in my house." "I wasn't hiding from you," she said. "I was hiding from myself. From them. From this." She gestured at the bound men. "And now?" he asked. Nia's gaze hardened. "Now it's too late to hide." Later, in Gideon's study, the fire burned low in the hearth. Only he and Nia remained. "You should have told me," he said. "You wouldn't have believed me." "I believe you now," he admitted. His tone was clipped, but not dismissive. "You fought off trained men with your bare hands. That tattoo, those scars, they're not decoration. They're warnings. I should have seen it sooner." "You weren't supposed to," Nia replied. He studied her, something sharp in his eyes. "You realize what this means? Cross isn't just trying to embarrass me anymore. He's coming for blood. And he's using you to do it." Nia nodded once. "Which means he's already lost. Because I know how he thinks. Men like Cross don't understand discipline. They only understand fear. And I know how to give it to them." The fire cracked, filling the silence. Gideon leaned back, his expression torn between awe and unease. For the first time in years, he wasn't the most dangerous person in the room. Nia stood, her posture straight, her presence undeniable. "You wanted the truth. Now you have it. The question is, Mr. Vale, what are you going to do with it? Her words lingered as she turned and left, the sound of her footsteps fading down the hall. Gideon stared into the flames. He had built empires on secrets, power, and fear, but none of his weapons matched the force he had just seen unveiled in his maid. She was no maid. She was a soldier reborn. And now she was in his house, whether he liked it or not. Morning split the mansion into 2 campaigns, one for optics, one for truth. In the study, Gideon stood over the conference table while Roland spread evidence like a map: 3 confiscated phones, 2 knives, a burner radio, and a folded sheet of paper with wiring diagrams. Nia stood opposite, arms at her sides, eyes on the hardware. Phones? Gideon asked. Roland nodded. Encrypted, not sophisticated. We cloned the SIMs before the cops arrived. Anything useful? Roland tapped the radio. Pre-programmed to a frequency rented by a private security firm, Harrow Cross Holdings. Gideon's face didn't move. Trent and Leonard Cross. Shells on shells, Roland said. But money leaves fingerprints. Gideon turned to Nia. We finish this today. How? She asked. Publicly, he said. Cross wants a spectacle. He'll get one, on our terms. Roland slid a tablet to Nia. Text thread off phone 2, last night. Enter East Wing. Target Lawson. Record panic. Handler handle, LX_47. Alex, Gideon said. Leonard Cross. He never could resist his initials. And this? Roland held up a micro SD card. Helmet cam from the intruder who hit a bookshelf. Your impact knocked it loose. Audio is rough, but the orders are clear. Play it, Gideon said. The tablet screen showed shaky night vision, gloved hands, a whisper, don't touch the billionaire. We want the woman. Another voice, confirm rip and film. We need her exposed. The room went very still. Gideon looked at Nia. They didn't come to steal. They came to strip you again. For leverage. Nia's jaw tightened. Then we stopped them using me. Gideon nodded once. Press at 2 o'clock. Board at noon. Roland, Loop Legal. Avery, prep the Blue Salon. Nia said nothing. Gideon faced her fully. You don't need to stand behind me, Nia. But I'm not letting them use you to break my house. Stand with me, or behind the scenes. Your call. She measured him. No sales pitch. No PR gloss. Just a line drawn. I stand, she said. The boardroom filled with money and nerves. 12 directors took their seats beneath a wall of smoked glass. Leonard Cross's face appeared on the central screen, live from his office. A viper's smile, tie immaculate. Gideon, Cross purred, I assume this is about your house guest. My staff, Gideon said. And yes, before you embarrass yourself further, a disclosure. We suffered a break-in last night. 3 intruders. We detained them. Oh dear, Cross said, fake sympathy curdling on the word. And to think you've been telling everyone you're secure. Shame. Gideon didn't blink. Their radios were tuned to bandwidths purchased by Harrow Cross Holdings. Their orders referenced rip and film, targeting a female employee. Silence snapped tight. A director coughed. Another checked a cufflink like it might hide him. Cross didn't flinch. Anyone can spoof a frequency. I'm afraid paranoia is making you sloppy. Roland tapped a key. The night vision clip filled the wall, the handler's voice hissing. Confirm rip and film. We need her exposed. The timestamp glowed. The frequency ID burned. For the first time, Cross's eyelids flickered. Cute, he said. Deep fakes are very fashionable. Gideon leaned in. You taught me a lot, Leonard. But you never learned when to shut up. He turned to the board. I've filed a criminal complaint for conspiracy and aggravated burglary. I've also moved to sever all remaining projects with cross-related entities. Full audit, full disclosure. Today. Murmurs cracked around the table. One director spoke first, voice careful. Gideon, if this is true. It is, Gideon said. And we will show the press at 2. You may attend or resign. Choose. Cross's smile fell away like a dead mask. You'll regret this. Not as much as you will, Gideon said and killed the feed. No one moved. Then, one by one, directors slid their phones away and met Gideon's stare. They knew where power sat. 2 o'clock, Gideon repeated. Bring your spine. At 1:57 p.m., the blue salon brimmed with cameras. Tripods sprouted like reeds. Lights burned white. Whispered predictions ran like static. Apology? Payout? Scapegoat? The city's appetite for blood was punctual. Gideon stepped to the lectern in a charcoal suit and a quiet tie. Roland flanked the back wall. Avery stood near a side door. Nia waited in the wings, invisible to most, watching everything. Thank you for coming, Gideon began. Last night, 3 men broke into my home. Their instructions were not to rob, but to humiliate a member of my staff, Ms. Nia Lawson. They failed. A low murmur. We have provided evidence to law enforcement, he continued. We will show you enough to make one point clear. Those responsible will be held accountable, no matter their title. A hand shot up. Mr. Vale, is it true your maid is former military? Did you place a soldier inside your household as security while deceiving investors? No, Gideon said. I hired a professional who excels at her job. I don't need to justify a woman's past to validate her present. Another voice, sharper. Isn't the real story that you hid a combatant as domestic staff? Nia stepped forward before Gideon could answer. Her entrance was simple, unannounced. The room turned as if pulled by wire. She took the second microphone. I wasn't hidden, she said. I was working. Men you quote tried to strip me of my uniform to make a spectacle. That is not a story. That is a crime. Lenses clacked toward her like teeth. Are you Force Recon, Ms. Lawson? A reporter pressed. Yes, she said. And I am a maid. Both can be true. Did you fight the intruders? I protected the people in my house, she said. That's what service looks like, whether you carry a rifle or a tray. The room faltered, unsure how to spin that into blood. Gideon gestured to Roland. The night vision clip filled the monitors. Audio swelled. Don't touch the billionaire. We want the woman. Confirm rip and film. We need her exposed. A hiss slithered through the press. Someone swore softly. Who ordered that? Another reporter called. Investigators will answer, Gideon said. But I will name what you're hearing. A plan to humiliate a black woman for leverage. That is not politics. That is cowardice. A door at the back burst open. Trent Harrow shoved through, face flushed, hair unbrushed, rage barely leashed. This is slander, he shouted. You're framing me. Roland moved before security could blink, bodies angling, path cut. Cameras pivoted, greedily. Trent wasn't smart enough to stop. You destroyed my life for a maid, he snarled at Gideon, then turned on Nia. You think your little tattoo makes you better then? He didn't finish. Gideon's voice cut him clean. Mr. Harrow, the detectives would like a word. He nodded past the cameras. 2 plainclothes officers stepped in, badges up. One took Trent's elbow. The other read from a small card. Trent Harrow, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit aggravated burglary. Get your hands off me. Trent barked, but the room had already decided what he was, noise. As they led him out, he aimed one last shot at the cameras. She's lying. She. The door shut. Sound died. Gideon returned to the mic. We're done here, unless anyone wants to defend ripping a woman's clothes for clicks. No one did. He stepped back. Nia set her mic down. A reporter called softly, not for spectacle. Ms. Lawson, will you stay? Nia looked at Gideon. He didn't speak for her. He didn't nod. He waited. I'll work my shift, she said. Like yesterday. Like tomorrow. She turned and moved off stage, steady as ever. The salon emptied into hallways of murmurs. On the terrace, wind worried the hedges. Roland joined Gideon by the balustrade. You made enemies today, Roland said. I confirmed them, Gideon replied. There's a difference. Roland glanced toward the shadowed doorway where Nia had vanished. She won't like being a symbol. She isn't, Gideon said. She's staff. And she's the reason 3 men didn't leave in body bags. Roland's mouth twitched. You saw what I saw. I did, Gideon said. And I understood something I should have understood last night. What's that? Gideon watched the garden paths converge on the fountain. Some people don't work for you or against you. They work for the ground you're standing on. Behind them, Avery approached, discreet as always. Mr. Vale, the board is requesting a follow-up call. Tell them I'll be there in 10. Gideon hesitated. And Avery, make sure Ms. Lawson's corridor is off-limits to press. Anyone pushes, they deal with me. Yes, sir. Gideon lingered a moment longer, the afternoon light sliding across stone. He felt the house settle around him, not peaceful but braced. The kind of braced that comes before a new order takes root. Reckoning wasn't loud. It was clear. Lines drawn. Masks stripped. Consequences real. He turned back inside. Somewhere down the service hall, a woman in a crisp uniform folded linen to perfect thirds and set a tray dead center on a cart, already moving the house forward. Tomorrow could begin. The mansion had gone unnervingly quiet after the press storm. Photographers lingered at the gates, but inside, marble floors gleamed as if nothing had happened. Still, the silence carried weight. Every servant moved briskly, whispering less, watching the corners. The air was too still for comfort. Gideon stood alone in his study, curtains half-drawn. The afternoon sun cut harsh stripes across the desk. His empire had survived a public ambush, but he felt no victory. Too many questions lingered, about enemies, about loyalty, about the woman who had turned his entire world upside down. The door clicked open. Nia stepped inside. She had changed uniforms, this one crisp and immaculate, but her bearing remained unmistakable, straight spine, sharp gaze, hands at ease yet ready. You asked for me, she said simply. He didn't look up at once. You embarrassed Cross in front of the world. You embarrassed me too, though I'll admit less painfully. Do you realize what happens next? She said nothing. Wars don't end with press conferences, he continued. They end with blood. Cross has resources and he isn't the top of the chain. Someone larger bankrolled this. You know it. I know it. Finally, he looked at her. So I'll ask you again, who are you really? And can I trust you when they come? Nia held his gaze. I'm the woman who cleans your floors and serves your guests. I'm also the Marine who walked 17 hours through Helmand carrying my brother in arms on my back. Both truths live in me. But the only one that matters here is this. I don't run from a fight when the people under my roof are threatened. Not in Afghanistan. Not here. He studied her for a long moment. You don't serve me, he said. No, she agreed. I protect the ground I stand on. Right now, that's your house. Whether you like it or not. Something shifted in his face, not quite a smile, not quite defeat. He nodded once. Then we fight together. Before either could speak further, Roland burst in. His composure, always polished, was cracked by urgency. Sir, Ms. Lawson, we've got a situation. He tossed a black envelope onto the desk. No stamp, no name, only Gideon's crest scrawled in silver ink. It was slid under the east door not 10 minutes ago. No cameras caught the courier. Gideon opened it. Inside lay a single photo, the mansion aerial view. Red circles marked Nia's quarters, Gideon's study, and the servants' wing. Beneath it, one line of typed text. Force recon bleeds tonight. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. How many entrances? Nia asked. 5 gated, 2 service, Roland replied. All locked, all manned. But if they had drones to take this photo, they've already mapped blind spots. Nia took the photo from Gideon's hand, eyes scanning angles, shadows, approach vectors. Her voice was flat, precise. They'll strike before midnight. Inside help or outside breach. Either way, this is no bluff. Gideon felt the weight settle. What do you propose? She looked at him square. We turn this mansion into a fortress. But more than that, we make an example. Whoever's pulling Cross's strings thinks you're a businessman they can rattle and I'm a maid they can shame. Tonight, they learn the truth. Roland exhaled sharply, half a laugh. God help whoever walks through those doors. Nia didn't smile. She moved toward the window, surveying the grounds with a soldier's eye. I'll need access to the surveillance feeds, control of staff movements, and freedom to set the defenses my way. No questions. No interference. Gideon nodded. Granted. She turned back, voice iron. Then get ready. Tonight we finish this. The mansion braced. Security lights burned brighter. Silent signals passed between guards. Inside, staff were quietly redirected to the safe wing. Roland oversaw logistics, but it was Nia whose commands flowed, crisp and exacting. She was no longer invisible. She was the center. By dusk, the storm broke. A drone whirred above the lawn before being blasted out of the sky by jamming signals. Moments later, the first black-clad silhouettes breached the north fence. They expected an easy kill. Instead, they found Nia waiting. Her uniform might have been that of a maid, but her stance was pure force recon, low, balanced, predatory calm. When the first man lunged, she moved like lightning, disarming him, snapping his rifle across his jaw. Another swung a blade. She pivoted, apron string whipping loose, looping the weapon from his grip before driving him to the floor. Fall back, someone shouted, panic leaking through. Too late. The mansion came alive. Lights blinding, gates locking, Roland's men sealing exits. Gideon himself appeared on the steps, calm in a storm, watching his enemies unravel. Nia fought with precision, each movement efficient, lethal, but never cruel. One by one, intruders dropped. Some fled, some froze. Within minutes, the assault collapsed. The last man standing stumbled forward, mask torn, eyes wild. He spat blood. You can't kill it, Lawson. We're just the edge of the blade. Nia's voice was low, final. Then tell your masters what happens when they cut into the wrong house. She let him crawl back toward the broken gate. Silence fell, broken only by the thrum of engines as police sirens approached. Later, in the study, Gideon poured 2 glasses of whiskey. He handed one to Nia. She accepted, though she didn't drink. You could have left, he said. No one would have blamed you. I don't abandon posts, she answered. He lifted his glass. Then tonight, Miss Lawson, this house is yours as much as mine. For the first time since she'd arrived months ago, Nia allowed the corners of her mouth to soften into something like a smile. Not victory. Not peace. But acceptance. The world outside would whisper about billionaires and scandals, tattoos and maids. But inside, beneath marble and light, 2 unlikely allies had drawn a line no enemy could cross. The maid was no longer invisible. The billionaire was no longer untouchable. And together, they were unbreakable.